It's time to take a ride on the Common Sense Express. Now here's your host, a wealth of information, ladies and gentlemen, Mary Souza.
Hello, welcome to Heads Up Radio. We have a very special program for you today. We have a wonderful guest speaker, a guest who's coming on our show today by phone, Stephanie Zimmerman, who heads up the Idahoans against Common Core. She'll be calling in from southern Idaho in just a few minutes to help us tackle a topic that is front and center discussion around here in Idaho and all over the country. The topic is the impact of the new Common Core standards in the school systems. The question is, are they a positive step toward improving education, or are they a federally controlled effort to take over education? You won't believe some of the very real information on this issue. It will make your hair curl. But first, let me get some housekeeping out of the way. Let me remind you that this is Wednesday. It's our day to do live shows. So Carmine Conti will do his live call-in show this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And he'll talk about sports and entertainment. Michael Loy will have his live show today at 6 p.m., where he talks about guns and hunting and personal safety. If you have a business or want to promote a group or an event, the advertising rates on this new station are very affordable, so just call the station after the show and talk with Terry. The phone number here is 208-758-0546. And please remind your friends that if they miss the show live, that they can listen to podcasts or YouTube audio stream on the website at any time that's convenient for them. It's all on the website at headsupradio.com. Okay, so let's get to our hot topic today, and that is Common Core. What is it, and why should we care? How does it affect our lives? The whole idea supposedly started back in 2008. There were, as the story goes, there were a small group of governors, who got together at some meeting and said, gee, we're really concerned about the quality of education in our states versus the other states, and we don't know how we measure up. So what we should do is we should create some sort of a standardized system across the nation so that all the schools are on the same page. And, of course, it was supposedly brought forward by the governors because that's a lot safer than saying it was a federal government-instituted program. However, behind the scenes, it appears that it probably was, or at least the powers that be behind the federal government are absolutely involved. But the standardization and testing and the achievement scores are what the governors touted at the time. Now, let me be very clear. The governors did not write the standards. The governors did not execute the plan to have this Common Core program put in place. The governors simply came up with the idea, the concept, and then talked many of their fellow governors into getting on board with it. Our governor, Butch Otter, here in Idaho, is definitely a big promoter of this program, and so is my opponent in this race, this coming up election, John Getty, who is he is the chair of the Idaho State Senate Education Committee. The State Senate Committee is the place where the term Common Core has now been changed to Idaho Core. And John Getty and others like to call it Idaho Core because they want everyone in Idaho to really think that it's different than Common Core, but it's not. And we had a candidate forum just a couple weeks ago where Senator Bob Nonini from Post Falls, who's also on the Senate Education Committee, stood up and very boldly debunked the myth that Idaho Core is different than Common Core. He told the story to everyone present at that candidate forum. He said, I was in the room with a handful of senators. It was a casual gathering, and a handful of senators, and one of them said, we should call it Idaho Core instead, so it sounds better to people. And that's how Idaho Core got its name. It is 100% the same as Common Core. So don't let that fool you. And standards are not curriculum, says my opponent, John Getty. He says, we're not writing, the Common Core is not a curriculum. It's just a set of standards. But anyone involved in education, and I used to be a clinical nursing instructor and was somewhat involved in education at that level, knows that standards set the curriculum because you test to the standards and you write the curriculum to the test. So if you're setting the standards, you're dictating the curriculum. And don't be fooled by that either. So I don't want to go too far without getting our really important guest, Stephanie Zimmerman, on with us. And so what we'll do is we'll take a little break, we'll get Stephanie on the phone, and we'll go forward. So when we come back, we'll be talking to Stephanie Zimmerman, who is the head of the Idahoans Against Common Core. And you're listening to the Heads Up Radio Network.
Experiencing an avalanche? The damage from water, fire, or mold can be a disaster and costly. Let Avalanche Cleaning and Restoration repair your disaster fast, safe, and reliably. Call 208-762-2227 for pricing, or if you have an avalanche emergency, call the hotline 24 hours, 818-4411. Avalanche Cleaning and Restoration. Fast, safe, and reliable. 818-4411.
In this world of moving commerce, your business is either moving forward or moving backwards. Make sure it moves forward. Maybe it's time we build a spot that fits your image. Blue Creative Group takes the time needed to put together a spot you want people to hear and make it a marketing tool to drive customers to your business. With the tools and experience ad agencies and radio stations lack, Blue Creative Group will score it, voice it, and produce it, and if need be, place it on radio and TV stations throughout the Northwest. Blue Creative Group lets you make your branding personal to your target audience. Be creative, be productive, while being cost-effective. Be Blue. Blue Creative Group. Creative marketing plans for the 21st century. Call today, 208-758-0546. 208-758-0546.
Sorry, Jen, I can't make it to our coffee date today. My kids are sick again, and I have a terrible headache, and medicine just doesn't seem to help.
Seems like you guys are always sick. Have you had your house tested for mold?
Come on, Jen, you know me. I keep my house spotless. There's no mold here.
That's what I thought about our house. We had the same problems last year and called mountain mold testing. They came right out and inspected our whole house for mold.
Really? What happened?
Well, mountain mold testing took air samples and the lab test showed that we were breathing dangerous, invisible mold. We got the mold cleaned up and now we don't have any more wheezing, headaches, or congestion. They gave us our health back.
Mold can cause numerous health problems, including allergies, chronic headaches, asthma, and lung infections. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly are especially susceptible. Call Mountain Mold Testing at 208-660-8877. That's 208-660-8877. Online at mountainmoldtesting.com.
Join Mary and her guests online and take a ride aboard the Common Sense Express.
Hi, welcome back. We are talking today about Common Core, and our special guest is calling in from southern Idaho. We have on the line, we have Stephanie Zimmerman, who is the head of Idahoans Against Common Core. If you want just a tremendously informative website to go and check out the issue of Common Core, go to Idahoans Against Common Core. It is so well organized and it really is full of great information. Stephanie, congratulations and kudos on your great work doing the research on this. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. And there is one slight correction I might make. I'm actually there's Idahoans Against Common Core, and there's also Idahoans for Local Education.
Yes.
That's the other website. So yeah, both of them are great websites. So thank you. And how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, thanks. You know, I'm just coming back from being a brand new grandma, and so I got to spend most of last week with my brand new granddaughter. So it was wonderful. But I'm back home now and getting back in the swing of all of this. And Common Core is a huge concern for me. And obviously, all of my children are grown. But now, starting in as a grandmother, I am really concerned about the quality of education that our children are going to and grandchildren are going to be facing.
You know, and it is true. It doesn't matter if you're a parent with children in the education system, if you are a homeschooling parent, if you're a grandparent, if you're a taxpayer. It doesn't matter what segment of the population you belong to. Common Core is going to affect you. And so to say, oh, you know, I'm a homeschooling parent or I don't have children in the education system, it's really naive to think that you don't need to be educated and involved in this because it will affect you in one way or another. Yes,
and from what I've been reading and researching, and we'll get into those details a little bit later, but it's all being aligned. All the textbooks for everyone are being aligned with Common Core standards. All the PSATs and SAT tests, all the college entrance tests are all being aligned. So no matter if you are homeschooling, charter schooling, private schooling, or public schooling, your kids are going to be affected by this.
Yes, and even the GED this January was aligned to it. So, you know, take a step, you know, that direction. Let's say you're a 40-year-old individual who didn't graduate from high school but wanted to go back and get your GED. It is now aligned to Common Core, and it's twice as long and twice as expensive. And the method of teaching that they use in Common Core is so different, it's going to be really difficult for an individual to go back and take that test and get that get their GED even.
Stephanie, I don't understand why they would, at the very beginning of this process now, why they would align the GED with it already, because no one has come out of a system that taught Common Core, so no one is familiar with those mechanisms yet.
They're trying to funnel everyone into that system as much as they can. And you're absolutely right. No one has graduated or come out of that system. But, you know, if you want to get the whole homeschool community, you know, Common Core aligned, then, you know, you have to make sure that you know, like you were mentioning, the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, and the GED, those are all aligned. Mm-hmm. You know, and that way you get every single segment of the population funneled in towards that Common Core method.
But this is certainly not, and please note the sarcasm in my voice, this is not an effort to take over the education system. Oh, no. So one of my biggest pet peeves about this, and I have many, and I'm sure you have even more, is that it's an untested, unproven system.
Absolutely. You know, in the pharmaceutical company business, they have, I think it's 3 different steps that they have to take to prove that that the new drug or whatever they're using is safe. Mm-hmm. They have completely skipped any of that with our children's minds. They have taken this new method of teaching and wholesale, you know, dumped it into our education system with absolutely no pilot testing, no, you know, they didn't do it in small pockets anywhere. Christopher Tenkin calls it dataless decision-making. It was foisted upon the states. It was, you know, here, we're done with it. You guys teach it. There's nothing to back up any of what they're telling us. You know, they say it's wonderful, but they have no data to back that up at all.
So I'd like to just investigate that with you just a little bit about how Idaho ended up with Common Core, because the Common Core timeline that's on your website, Idahoans for Local Education, is really fascinating. And what jumped off the page to me is that even though this whole concept may have been discussed by some governors back in 2008, in May of 2009, Governor Otter and Superintendent Tom Luna signed a binding memorandum of agreement with the National Governors Association and some other groups that are involved in this Common Core thing. They signed this, what we call an MOU, or that's what we call it, Memorandum of Understanding, in May of 2009, before the standards were even written, before the State Board of Education looked at it or approved it, before the legislature knew anything about it. How could they do that?
And that's a good question. They could do it. Could they do it legally? No, there's actually a lot of question right now about whether or not that agreement is even legal because of those reasons, and because neither the governor nor the Superintendent Luna, have that they don't have the right to sign up the whole state for something. That's not in their writ of authority. But so many governors did it. 45 governors signed on to that. And what's interesting is you read that memorandum of agreement. You look down at the very bottom because they'll tell you it's not a federal program. It's not a federal program. It's not a federal program. The last paragraph in that agreement spells out pretty specifically that, look, the federal government has a role in this.
I have it right here in front of me because you sent me a copy of it, and I almost fell off my chair when I read that last paragraph. The last paragraph, because John Getty has been saying throughout this whole campaign, and so has Governor Otter, that this is not a federal program. It is not federally controlled. The federal government does not have a hand in this. Look at what this says, and this was way back before, in 2009, before anyone even knew about Common Core, and they signed this memorandum of agreement, which the last paragraph says, the federal role. It's titled The Federal Role. So there's obviously a significant federal role in this project because it has its own separate paragraph, and it says, I won't read the whole thing, but it is... the parties support a state-led effort, not a federal effort. Of course, they're going to start with that. But there is an appropriate federal role in supporting the state-led effort. And then it goes on to tell about how the federal government will use funding to control this and how the funding will be it says, finally, the federal government can revise and align existing federal education laws with and benchmarking efforts and federal research, and they can go in, they can change the laws, they can control it with funding, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Yes, and interestingly enough, if you move forward, until today, there are several different places where the federal government has intruded on this, and just recently, the state of Washington and is the first, but they lost what they're calling their ESEA waiver, or their No Child Left Behind waiver.
Okay.
And in the year 2014, this school year, every student in every school was supposed to be 100% proficient in English language arts and in math. Now, we all know that that is going to be impossible. No matter how well a teacher does in a class, they're never going to have 100% of their students proficient. Well, part of getting states to adopt Common Core was they said, you adopt Common Core and we'll give you this waiver from this aspect of No Child Left Behind. Well, every state knew there was no way they were going to meet that. So they said, okay, we'll take it. We'll adopt Common Core and you'll give us this 2-year waiver from this. Well, Washington State lost its waiver. Overnight, all of the schools, every single school in Washington State became a failing school because it didn't meet that 100% proficiency benchmark.
But they have Common Core, and they have Common Core in Washington State. So why did they lose their waiver?
Because this is interesting, and Common Core isn't just a set of standards and assessments. Mm-hmm. Common Core is a 4-pillared education reform. Now, a lot of people, particularly the proponents of Common Core, like to focus on the standards and assessments. Why don't you like standards and assessments? But there are actually 4 pillars. The first is standards and assessments. The second is the statewide longitudinal data system, or the data collecting. The third is teacher evaluations or redistribution of teachers. And the fourth one is turning around of low-performing schools. Washington State didn't fulfill the third pillar, which is the teacher evaluations based on the high-stakes testing. Because they didn't fulfill that third pillar of Common Core, they lost their waiver. So even though, yes, they have adopted the Common Core standards and assessments, they still lost the waiver, and 100% of their schools are now considered failing schools. Did that make sense? Were you able to follow that?
It did. But I'm just amazed that they can now say all the schools in Washington State are failing schools. And so what consequence does it have then to say that they're failing schools? Do they lose federal funding?
There's a tightening, as I understand it, and no one's really 100% certain yet because this is the first time this has happened, but there's going to be a tightening of how they can spend their federal dollars. So, federal dollars already come with all these strings attached to them. You know, if you're going to take the money, you've got to implement the program. Now, all of a sudden, there are more strings and they're more tightly wrapped around, around the money. What can the schools do with it? So everybody's kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens because this just barely took place. So, it will be interesting to watch the process in the next few months.
Well, common sense, and that is the name of this radio program, is the Common Sense Express. Common sense dictates that whoever holds the money holds the control. And so when people like John Getty or Governor Otter say, or Representative Luke Malik, who's been saying it too, this is not a federal program. It's not a federal program. If the federal government holds the dollars, it certainly is. And they've shown that they are more than willing to pull the strings. And obviously Washington State is the biggest and best example of that. But what about Indiana? Indiana has tried to back out of Common Core now, and the federal government is coming down on them saying, no, you're going to lose all kinds of funding, and you can't do that, when it was supposed to be an optional program.
Exactly. So that's just another example of not a federal program, not a federal program, not a federal program. Wait, if you don't adopt it, though, you lose out on federal dollars. So, there are all sorts of holes in this argument that it's not a federal program or that it's not a federal mandate. At this point, it is. And anybody with any common sense, like you say, can see it. Yes,
well, absolutely. Stephanie, I have a quote from George Will, who is how would you describe George Will as he's been in the journalism field for so long, and he's a commentator on all things conservative and common sense. And you sent me this link to his quote, and I just really liked it so much that we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back after a quick break, and we'll play the George Will quote, and then what I'd like to do is hear your evaluation of that. So can you hold on for us?
I certainly can.
Okay. Hold on, everyone. We'll be back in just a minute, and you're listening to the Common Sense Express on the Heads Up Radio Network.
Experiencing an avalanche? The damage from water, fire, or mold can be a disaster and costly. Let Avalanche Cleaning and Restoration repair your disaster fast, safe, and reliably. Call 208-762-2227 for pricing, or if you have an avalanche emergency, call the hotline 24 hours, 818-4411. Avalanche Cleaning and Restoration. Fast, safe, and reliable. 818-4411.
Sorry, Jen, I can't make it to our coffee date today. My kids are sick again, and I have a terrible headache, and medicine just doesn't seem to help.
Seems like you guys are always sick. Have you had your house tested for mold?
Come on, Jen, you know me. I keep my house spotless. There's no mold here.
That's what I thought about our house. We had the same problems last year and called mountain mold testing. They came right out and inspected our whole house for mold.
Really? What happened?
Well, mountain mold testing took air samples, and the lab test showed that we were breathing dangerous, invisible mold. We got the mold cleaned up, and now we don't have any more wheezing, headaches, or congestion. They gave us our health back.
Mold can cause numerous health problems, including allergies, chronic headaches, asthma, and lung infections. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly are especially susceptible. Call Mountain Mold Testing at 208-660-8877. That's 208-660-8877. Online at mountainmoldtesting.com.
Jump aboard the Common Sense Express. Now, here's your host, Mary Souza.
Hi, welcome back. We are talking today, we're talking about Common Core in Idaho and across the country. This is such an important topic, and everyone really, it will impact your lives in a major way. So we really need to pay attention to this now while it is fairly new, and there's perhaps some things that we can do about it. My guest today is calling in from southern Idaho, and it is Stephanie Zimmerman. She's with Idahoans for Local Education and Idahoans Against Common Core. So today we've been talking about Common Core, and I want to start this segment out with a quote from George Will, who is a conservative observer and commentator, and he has some very strong feelings about Common Core. So let's listen to George.
The advocates of the Common Core say if you like local control of your schools, you can keep it, period. If you like your local curriculum, you can keep it, period. And people don't believe them for very good reasons. This is a thin end of an enormous wedge of federal power that will be wielded for the constant progressive purpose of concentrating power in Washington so that it can impose continental solutions to problems nationwide. You say it's voluntary. It has been driven by the use of bribes and coercion in the form of waivers from No Child Left Behind or race to the top money to buy the compliance of these 45 states, two of which, Indiana and I believe Oklahoma, have already backed out, and they will not be the last. Watch the verb align in this argument. They're going to align the SAT and ACT tests with the curriculum. They're going to align the textbooks with the tests. And sooner or later, you inevitably have a national curriculum that disregards the creativity of federalism. What are the chances, one, that we're going to have 5 or 6 creative governors experimenting with different curricula, or one creative, constant, permanent Washington bureaucracy overlooking our education? We've had 50 years now of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, 50 years of federal involvement that has coincided with stagnation in test scores across the country.
Well, I think George had an awful lot to say that was so important and so critical to what we're talking about. I loved his comment, if you want to keep your curriculum, your local curriculum, you can. And if you want to, I mean, it's Obamacare, the promises over and over again that do not come true. And obviously it's a controlling program. So Stephanie, what's your take on all of this and the wisdom of George Will?
You know, I agree 100% with him. You know, you want to control the population, you control the health care, you control the education, and you've not just controlled one generation, but you've controlled, you know, generations to come.
Yes, that's the scariest part.
Yeah, it is. And that's exactly what they've done. One of the great things about the United States of America is that each state could experiment and do what it wanted, and try new things. And it didn't affect the whole country. Common Core has turned that totally on its head because everyone has adopted it. We will not have pockets where you can say, oh, look, Common Core, they didn't use it here, and look at how much better their schools are doing. You know, there are a few states, but even those states that didn't adopt Common Core are going to have a difficult time because, like you mentioned earlier, all those college entrance exams and that, everything is being aligned. The curriculum, the tests, I mean, and so we have done away with part of that great American experiment, which allowed us to take different things and experiment with them in small pockets and really grow in greatness because if it worked, other states could adopt it. If it didn't work, you know, then it only affected a small segment of the population. So they've taken that control. They've centralized it in Washington, and here we go. We're headed down that road.
We are definitely, and it people honestly cannot wrap their heads around the intense and fast control mechanisms that have been put in place. I was at a candidate forum not too long ago, just last week, and I mentioned that my husband's cousin, who's a very close friend of mine, is a master teacher over in Hawaii. Hawaii it has Common Core, but they are also they're introducing it this year. They're teaching to it this year, and then the testing will start next year. She's been teaching for 30 years, and she said she really dislikes Common Core. And I have to tell you, politically, we don't agree. I'm much more conservative, and she's quite liberal. And we are on the same page with this topic because she does not agree she does not like Common Core. And she told me that using Common Core, that they are required to do this year, makes teaching very robotic. That was the word she used, and she used it several times. And she said they are trying to make the teachers and the students all conform to the same behaviors and the same learning style, the same learning pace. She's very concerned about her students. She said that they are given scripts. And so when I was at this candidate forum, I mentioned the scripts. And then the next day on one of the local gossip blogs, they were going after me because how crazy and what a nutcase I am to have said that there are scripts. Well, guess what? She sent me the scripts. I have them. And I have a sampling of them. And there's also a national or article in an education journal that talks about scripts and about a teacher from Missouri, Susan Kimball from Missouri, who says that they're given scripts and to present the information. And then if the student has a question, the teacher is not supposed to just answer this question. The teacher is supposed to read the next line of the script in order to answer the question. The script has optional answers to the question, and the teachers are supposed to read those rather than just read or teach the student as they normally would. This is a quote from this teacher in Missouri. Educators have no power to alter the curriculum to cater to the kids who learn differently. That is so scary to all of us as parents because a lot of parents have children who are slower learners or learn with different mechanisms. I happen to have had kids that were very bright, and they were lost in a regular classroom with regular curriculum because they would get bored and they would just look off into the sunset and they just didn't care about school. And so they're advanced learners, and they're not going to be taken care of in this this Common Core curriculum either. So we have some serious problems starting to brew.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, was it your sister-in-law, that she's, very different than you politically.
Yes.
This is a topic that crosses all political lines. I will admit I am very conservative, libertarian-leaning. Mm-hmm. I have been reading the Huffington Post of all things and agreeing with it because they're right. Because this crosses parents. If you're a parent and if you're a good teacher, you are not just liberal or conservative or whatever. You are a parent or a teacher, and the well-being of a child is far more important than what political leanings you have. But Common Core, as you read all of the documents, Common Core is not about innovation or entrepreneurship or any of that. All it is about is making you a widget in the machine, mm-hmm. making you conform, making you a good employee. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a good employee. We all need to be able to work hard and to work good.
Of course.
But what happens to the creativity when every child is taught this exact same thing at the exact same time in the exact same way? You do not have the ability to to help a student who like your children, were gifted and needed to go at a slightly different pace? Or how about those that are equally as bright but just learn a little differently and need things taught to them a little differently? That's not an option in Common Core. And you hear that time and again as you talk to gifted teachers or as you talk to special ed teachers. They are so concerned with what is going to happen to both sets of children, because there is no room in this for creativity at all.
And the fact that it's an untested and unproven program that's going in place, as you said, nationwide. Let me just tell you, from my own personal experience, one of our children was in second grade and it used to be the California education group that used to dictate what was put into textbooks because they had the biggest population, and so the textbook publishing companies would go on what they wanted to do. And there was this very flawed program back about 25 years ago that was called Whole Language. It was a grammar and reading and writing program, and it was, I mean, anyone with any ounce of common sense could look at this and say, this is a mess, this is terrible. But and I did at the time. I was really concerned. I talked to several teachers, and I basically homeschooled our daughter after school, after she came back home. I would work with her on these things in order to get her up to speed for third grade. She wasn't even ready. And the third grade teacher told me that she was one of the better students because she could at least read these. So there was a whole group of about 2 or 3 years worth of students at these vulnerable ages that felt very uncomfortable with their writing, reading, grammar abilities. It'd be fascinating to do research because they pulled the program. They realized it was a big failure, so they pulled it after a couple of years. But you can't get that back again, those 2 or 3 years worth of learning at those vulnerable ages for those kids. Their confidence is not there. They go forward. They realize they can't write sentences well. Their spelling is non-existent. Their grammar's terrible. And luckily, our daughter came out of it fine because we were on top of it and worked with her individually. And she's great, and she's a professional nurse doing fabulously. But a lot of kids, their confidence level. So if we have Common Core in place across the whole country, and it causes these kids to be failures at math. I just as a little sideline, a local teacher here who has spent a long time teaching primary math told me that Common Core is sexist against boys because at the primary levels, boys are not as good with language skills and writing skills but they're very good typically. Not it's all individual, but typically they grasp math concepts very quickly. But in math, in Common Core, it requires them, in order to get the problem correct, they have to be able to write it out in words. And a lot of these boys can get the right answer, but they can't describe in words how they got their answer. And so they will feel that they are failures at math, and then that stigma will stick with them as they go forward. There's so many problems with the way this has been set up.
Let's go back to the whole language that you were talking about in California.
Yes.
That's coming back through Common Core.
No.
They will not be, they will not be doing a lot of phonics. Now, granted, there will be a lot of really good teachers out there who do their very best to overcome the garbage that is in Common Core. So this is putting a huge weight on teachers who love their students, who love what they do, and who look at it and know it's wrong. They will do their best. Secondly, I am the mother of 6 boys.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I've got 2 girls in that mix, but 6 boys. And they all are very different, but you are absolutely right. Common Core math kills the kids who struggle with language skills, which, let's be honest, little boys do not talk as much as little girls. They just don't have that yet. It's just part of the differences in their brain. Common Core absolutely is biased against little boys because, yes, they're supposed to come to an answer and then explain why they did. So all these little boys who've got it up there in their brain and they understand it and they know it, like you said, they are going to feel stupid because they're being told they're supposed to do something that is completely developmentally inappropriate. There are child development experts from across the country who are looking at this and saying not only is it developmentally inappropriate, it is child abuse. It is educational child abuse because of the stigma that children are now going to be putting on themselves because they can't do things that they shouldn't be, worrying about doing, that they shouldn't have to think that they can do yet. So this is institutionalized child abuse in a lot of ways.
Well, and so much of the time, what the attitude that you come to education with dictates whether you're going to enjoy learning. And if we create an attitude very early on that you are failing in something or you're inadequate in something, kids are going to hate learning. They're going to hate going to school, and that will be it. That will follow them for as long as they go. I'm really concerned also, Stephanie, about the data collection, and I really want to get into that. Kathy Sims is a local representative here, and we were at a candidate forum, and she brought up the whole concept of the concern about data collection through Common Core. Representative Luke Malik, who is not running against Kathy, but he spoke up anyway, and he basically said that by words. It was right after I talked about the scripts and Common Core, and he said that some people are just wearing tinfoil hats. He was very angry. Tinfoil hats when it comes to this issue of Common Core, and they're just trying to get political advantage out of it. And I've known Luke for a long time and really did not appreciate his attitude or his disrespectfulness in this public forum or in any forum for that matter. And I said, Luke, are you using that tinfoil hat comment toward me? And he said, no, it's toward Kathy. It's for Kathy. And I'm thinking, goodness sakes, data collection is a very serious concern with Common Core. My cousin-in-law, that is a teacher in Hawaii, told me that the students have a student ID number from the very start of their education through Common Core that follows them all the way through their education, even into college. So even though the data that is collected is, I can't say the word well, and so I won't try, but it's grouped together and it's not individually identifiable, but because of these student ID numbers, it really actually is. And it's much more identifiable than it has been in the past for the group information that's sent to Washington, D.C. Does that sound correct to you, Stephanie?
Oh, the only thing that is not correct in that whole thing is the fact that the data is not aggregate anymore. Aggregate meaning that everybody's lumped together. It is disaggregate. And in Idaho right now, we're a little further behind than Hawaii is because our unique student ID number only follows our students from kindergarten through high school. It doesn't transfer on into college. However, I have seen documents that show that they are working towards doing that, connecting all of that data. We have received $9 million from federal grants to put together the statewide longitudinal data system. And at first, we received the first grant, and I think it was $5 million, and it was for what was called the P20. And that was going to, in Idaho, that's preschool through 20 years of school. Now in Oregon, that means prenatal through 20 years of school.
Oh, wow.
And then we received an additional, I think it was $3 million, $3+ million. So the total was $9 million to add the W onto that. So we have what's called a P20W, preschool through 20 years of school onto workforce, and they have a data backpack that will follow you from the day you start school on into the workforce. So you have a problem in the third grade with, let's say you're a typical little boy and you can't sit still and you're bouncing up and down. That will go in your permanent record. Your employer at some point may have access to that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's there. And was it Malik?
Yes.
He can call us tinfoil hats all he wants. I have seen the documentation. I have seen the things that our governor, that our superintendent of education, that these gentlemen have signed and other people have signed, I can see where we have agreements between the Department of Transportation and the Department of Labor to go in and, using several different data points, gather all your information and connect your student ID with your Social Security number.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. It's there. The DOT and the DOL have an agreement to do that. It is illegal. Oh, yeah?
Stephanie, if you don't mind, I would like to take a quick break. We have a text message that just came in from one of our listeners that was asking about this very issue of data collection, and we were probably talking about it just when it came in, so I'm glad to know that. But let's take a quick break and then come back, because I really want to talk more about this data collection, so please hold on. And everyone, you are listening to the Common Sense Express on the Heads Up Radio Network. We'll be right back.
In this world of moving commerce, your business is either moving forward or moving backwards. Make sure it moves forward. Maybe it's time we build a spot that fits your image. Blue Creative Group takes the time needed to put together a spot you want people to hear and make it a marketing tool to drive customers to your business. With the tools and experience ad agencies and radio stations lack, Blue Creative Group will score it, voice it, and produce it, and if need be, place it on radio and TV stations throughout the Northwest. Blue Creative Group lets you make your branding personal to your target audience. Be creative, be productive, while being cost-effective. Be Blue. Blue Creative Group. Creative marketing plans for the 21st century. Call today, 208-758-0546. 208-758-0546.
Join Mary and her guests online and take a ride aboard the Common Sense Express.
Hi, we're back, and we're talking about Common Core, and we do not have enough time to cover this topic well, so we might have to do another show on this, Stephanie, because this is just too much. We're talking with Stephanie Zimmerman, who has called in from Southern Idaho. She's with the Idahoans for Local Education and the Idahoans Against Common Core, and she's just a wealth of information on this topic. We only have about 10 minutes left, so we have so much to talk about. But the data collection, and let me just quickly give everyone the text number here. If you'd like to text us a message or a question, please just call 208-244-6390. 244-6390, or you can email Mary at headsupradio.com. But we are talking about the data collection in Common Core, and it's just incredible, the information. So Stephanie was just telling us how it is connected from kindergarten, and now, they want to put in pre-kindergarten and have the state pay for that, which means the state would control it as well, and that means the federal government would control the state controlling the pre-kindergarten kids and what they learn and the data collection from all of that. So all the way up through workforce now, connecting with our Social Security numbers. So, Stephanie, is there any way to avoid this kind of data collection?
According to our current Attorney General, parents have no option to opt out of the statewide longitudinal data system.
Wow.
So no, and unfortunately, as I sat in Senator Getty's office and discussed the data bill that he introduced, he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, well, if you don't like the data collecting, why don't you just pull your kids home and homeschool them?
Wow.
Yeah. Because the bill that he originally offered had holes clear through it, and that was his answer If you don't like the data collecting, if you don't like the federal government, and don't kid yourself, the federal government has access to all this. If you don't like the federal government accessing your children's data, just homeschool them. The problem with that being, though, is as you read through speeches by Arne Duncan and documents, guess who their next target is? They want to find a way that they can track the kids that are homeschooled. So, parents right now, like I said, according to Attorney General Wasden, have no option but to let their children's data be collected. The one thing you can do that will offer a little bit of protection to your children is to opt them out of the Smarter Balanced assessments, because that is data collecting. That's what's called psychometric data, and if you go onto my website, I've got a whole post about that. And that, they don't say that they're going to give the data to the federal government, but they do say that they are going to leave it open or give open access to the federal government to this data. So that is the one small thing that you can do that protects your child a little bit. But there's not a lot you can do right now.
Well, and that's the thing. You can opt them out now, but what about down the road just a little bit? I mean, this is, as George Will said, this is the narrow end of the wedge, the thin end of the wedge. I mean, it's just they're getting their foot in the door, and then will come all of the other changes and requirements, and if you want to keep the program, you'll have to do this. If you've got to. What's interesting is that John Getty, that you were talking about, that he was talking about the data collection. He did an interview just last July on a radio show down in Boise with Austin Hill. And it was about Common Core, and Austin Hill was asking him specific questions, tough questions, I thought. I was impressed. And asked about the data collection and the concerns that people have about data collection. And I cannot tell you how uninterested Senator Getty seemed on that issue. He didn't believe that there was a problem. He didn't believe that it was going to be a concern for people. He just said, I just don't think people are going to be, bothered by that at all. And he said, I don't think the states will be in a problem with it. That Common Core will be implemented this past fall. He was warning that it would be implemented this past fall because the State Board of Education approved it, and the school districts must comply. So the school districts have no leeway on it. And I didn't want to overlook the fact that everyone is saying that the legislature approved Common Core. And really, that is not the story. I know you know this, but that's really not the story. First of all, 2 years prior to the legislature even seeing Common Core in front of just a few of them, very, very few. 2 years before that is when Governor Otter and Superintendent Tom Luna signed the binding memorandum of assessment, getting Idaho into Common Core whether we wanted to or not. And the State Board of Education didn't approve it until 2 years. Let's see, is it 2 years? 1 year later. And then the legislature, it didn't even go to the whole legislature. It went to John Getty's Senate Education Committee only. That's only who saw it. It was right in the middle of all the Luna laws going through, and there was a lot of furor about those. And it was a very small handful of the committee that even dealt with it, and they didn't vote on it as a normal thing. It was voted as a rule somehow, and I don't even understand all of that. But it was a minimal showing in the legislature. The whole legislature did not have a vote on it. And yet Senator Getty, Governor Otter, everyone says, well, the legislature approved it, so it's good to go. It's not, and we should never have allowed that to continue on. Now that everyone is knowing about it, do you think, Stephanie, is there a way for the legislature, if we can change the people in Boise, is there a way for the legislature to walk this back?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why it is so important. And I'm going to sound like a campaign commercial here for a minute, but I have been working on these individuals' campaigns because the only way we are going to get rid of Common Core without pulling teeth is if we elect the right people. And the right people are Russ Fulcher and John
For governor.
Yes, and then John Einen for Superintendent of Education.
Yes, and Chris Troupis for Attorney General, because
Yes.
the Attorney General position is critical to all of this, because the Attorney General interprets the law, and our current Attorney General is very much a go-along with the establishment, with Washington, D.C., with the progressive movement kind of person. So,
Absolutely, and in fact, I'm working on getting it up on my website, but Chris Troupis just put out a statement on Common Core and parental rights. And Chris Troupis will absolutely protect parental rights. He understands that is where, that is an inalienable right, the right of the parent to determine their children's educational future.
yes, and to underscore that just another moment, my opponent, Senator John Getty, as chair of the Senate Education Committee, just a few months ago, at the end of this last session, there was a parental rights in education bill that went through the House, and it was passed overwhelmingly by the House, 64-5, was sent on to the Senate. John Getty held it and would not let it even be heard by his committee. Now, the way it's supposed to work is that it is heard by the committee, and all the special interest groups on all sides of the issue come in and testify and give their opinions, and then the committee mulls it over and decides. But he held it because he told them that for education-related, the teachers' union and the school board association and two more, until they approved it ahead of time, he would not allow it to even be heard by his committee. That is terrible. I just think that's such an obfuscation of law and just really blocking the public's rights.
Well, Mary, that's why we need to get you in there too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to encourage everyone that's listening to get out a piece of paper and a pen, and if you care about Common Core, please vote for Russ Fulcher for governor, Jim Schmelik for lieutenant governor, Chris Troupis for attorney general. Who am I? Let's see, who's next on the list?
John Einen.
John Einen, it's E-Y-N-O-N. John Einen for superintendent of schools. Let's see, and there's one more. Wait, and Lawrence Denny. Lawrence Denny for Secretary of State. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Stephanie, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you pretty quickly here. We're running out of time. I honestly do want to do another show on this. Would you be available?
I would be available. I'll do this again. Like you mentioned, there is so much to talk about and so much to go into. There's no way that it can be covered in an hour. So call me back and we'll do this again. Okay,
and I'm thanking Stephanie Zimmerman, who has called in from southern Idaho. She is with Idahoans for Local Education and Idahoans Against Common Core. Go visit those websites. They are wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Okay. And we are going to wrap up here. I just want you to remember that your vote makes a big difference on this. Your vote is your power. And we really have to put together that every single vote that we have, every single person makes a difference in changing the course of these things. It may seem like it's a small issue, but if we can just turn Idaho, we can help turn the nation away from these kinds of overreaches, this invasion of the federal government into our privacy, into our children's education rights, into our rights as parents. So please be careful and go out on this next Tuesday, May 20th, go to your polling place and register and vote for the people that we were just talking about, especially Russ Fulcher for governor and Chris Troupis for attorney general and John Einen for superintendent of schools. Let me leave you with a quote. Government is not reason, it is not eloquent, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And that was a quote from George Washington. So let's be careful with this political power and take it back. I'm Mary Souza, and thanks for listening to the Common Sense Express on the Heads Up Radio Network. Have a great afternoon.
Heads Up Radio's audio stream comes from people like you. Join the thousands that make independent radio stations like Heads Up Radio available to the public and your community. Please donate today.
The views, opinions, and conclusions expressed in this broadcast are those of the host and their guests, and not necessarily those of Heads Up Radio. The host and guest are solely responsible for all content.